This information is presented by Bluewater Auto Restoration. Welcome back. This is week 15 of the 2026 Bluewater Auto Restoration podcast. We release new podcasts every Saturday morning. In this deep dive, we look at European versus North American auto and moto restoration philosophy.
Thanks for having me back. I am really excited to get into this one today.
Yeah, it's a fascinating topic, and I want to set the stage for you listening right now. Have you ever, looked at the results from a high-end classic car auction and just felt like you were completely losing your mind?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it happens all the time if you watch the big auction blogs.
Right, because you scroll through the listings and you see, say, a 1969 American muscle car, like a Copel Camaro or maybe a Hemi Cuda, and it is objectively flawless.
Better than it ever was in 1969.
Exactly. The panel gaps are laser straight, the paint has this mirror finish that is so deep it looks wet, and the chrome is just blinding. And it sells for a massive number, maybe $500,000.
Which makes sense for the amount of labor put into it.
Right. But then, literally the very next lot rolls across the block. And it's a 1950s European sports car. And the paint is chalky, it's flaking off in sheets.
The interior is usually a mess, too.
Yeah, the leather on the driver's seat is cracked, split open, and literally spilling as horsehair stuffing everywhere.
Yeah.
The engine bay looks like it hasn't even seen a rag in 4 decades.
Oh.
And the bidding war for this dusty, faded relic just goes absolutely atmospheric.
Oh, yeah, hammering down for 10, maybe $15 million. It's wild.
It is. So today's mission is to really unpack the deep-seated cultural, geographic, and philosophical differences that dictate how the world builds, drives, and ultimately restores its classic machines.
Because, I mean, we aren't just talking about different wrenches in the toolbox here or, different settings on a spray gun.
No, it's way deeper than that.
It really is. We are talking about two fundamentally different attitudes toward history, toward authenticity and usability. It's a psychological divide just as much as a mechanical one.
Yeah, if you look at the methodologies used in high-end European restoration houses versus top-tier North American custom shops, they're basically speaking two entirely different languages.
Completely different languages when it comes to the preservation of a mechanical object.
And for you listening, whether you're maybe planning out your own garage project, or you're looking to understand global auction values, or you're just fascinated by how culture shapes the objects we love, this deep dive is going to completely change how you look at classic vehicles.
I agree. You really won't look at a tarnished bolt or a perfectly aligned car door the same way ever again.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because before we can understand how these two continents go about tearing down and restoring your vehicles, we have to explore why they built them so differently in the first place.
Right, because a car's original purpose completely dictates its eventual restoration.
Exactly. And I always hear this cliche analogy comparing a nimble European sports car to an American muscle car as like comparing an Olympic fencer to a heavyweight boxer.
Yeah, that one gets thrown around a lot.
It does, but it's a bit tired. I prefer to look at it like architectural engineering. A European car was designed like a high-end mechanical chronograph packed into the smallest possible space.
And the American car is like a diesel locomotive.
Exactly. Massive,
Okay.
overbuilt, and designed to move heavy loads over infinite distances. So, looking at our sources, did the environment dictate the car, or did racing culture dictate the design?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, geography is basically destiny here.
Yeah.
Let's look at Europe first. You really have to picture the physical constraints those post-war engineers were dealing with. We are talking about historic, centuries-old infrastructure.
Like the cobblestone streets in Rome.
Yes, or the incredibly tight blind alleys of Paris. Not to mention the steep, twisting, low-grip mountain passes of the Swiss Alps.
Which were mostly built for foot traffic and horse carts, right?
Exactly. They were established way before the internal combustion engine was even a concept. So the engineering response naturally had to prioritize agility.
Because a massive, heavy vehicle with a long wheelbase just physically couldn't navigate a medieval village.
You would just get stuck. So that constraint birthed a philosophy of absolute precision engineering. Companies like Porsche, BMW, Alfa Romeo, they had to prioritize an incredibly tight package.
But if you have a really small footprint, you inherently have a smaller engine displacement.
Right. And to get performance out of a small engine, you have to maximize efficiency. So you see this relentless pursuit of lightweight construction. And mechanically, this environment absolutely necessitated fully independent rear suspensions and really short gear ratios.
Wait, let's dig into the physics of that suspension setup for a second, because I think that's the defining mechanical split. Why does an alpine pass specifically demand an independent rear suspension?
Well, it comes down to unsprung mass and camber control. Imagine driving up a mountain pass with consecutive high-speed hairpin turns.
Okay.
The road surface is rarely smooth, right? An independent suspension allows each wheel to articulate vertically on its own.
So it doesn't transfer that bump to the other side.
Exactly. If your inside rear tire hits a huge bump mid-corner, an independent setup absorbs it. It keeps the outside tire's contact patch firmly planted on the tarmac. A solid rear axle would transmit that bump straight across the heavy axle housing.
Which would upset the whole rear end of the car.
Yeah, potentially causing snap oversteer and sending you off a cliff. So Europe really rewarded finesse and mechanical grip.
And those short gear ratios tie directly into the small engine design, too. If you have an engine that only makes power way up at, like, 5,000 RPM, you need the driver to constantly row through the gears.
Right, you're constantly braking, downshifting, accelerating out of tight corners. The car has to be an extension of the driver's nervous system.
And it seems like they integrated advanced tech much earlier because of this.
Oh, absolutely. Things like mechanical fuel injection, dual overhead cams, and eventually variable valve timing, all designed for rapid turn-in response.
Okay, so let's pivot across the Atlantic to North America. Because the geographic canvas could not be more of a contrast.
That's totally different.
We are talking about the post-war rollout of the interstate highway system. Sprawling, wide highways and long Midwestern straightaways.
With minimal elevation changes. The infrastructure was built for massive footprints.
Right. Unimpeded high-speed travel across an entire continent.
So the American engineering response was, quite logically, a celebration of straight-line dominance.
Yeah, I mean, why would an engineer in Detroit spend millions developing a complex, independent rear suspension when the roads are perfectly straight and 4 lanes wide?
Exactly. They just didn't need it. Instead, Detroit marshaled the solid rear axle.
Which, to be fair to the American engineers, is a brilliant piece of technology for what they needed it to do. It's incredibly durable.
And it is vastly superior for putting massive amounts of torque down in a straight line.
Right. When you dump the clutch on a high-horsepower drag launch, the physics of a solid axle, like the pinion angle and anti-squat geometry, it plants the rear tires into the pavement way better than an early independent setup would.
An early independent setup would just suffer from severe wheel hop and break half shafts left and right.
So Detroit matched this bulletproof rear end with massive big block V8 engines.
Yeah, instead of chasing high RPM efficiency with complex overhead cams, they just relied on sheer displacement. A pushrod V8 is compact, reliable, and delivers huge low-end torque.
So if Europe is about short gears for hairpin turns, America is about long, tall gearing. You literally just point the steering wheel at the horizon, press the throttle, and let 400 foot-pounds of torque push you forward at a lazy 2,000 RPM.
And because the roads were so long, they prioritized interior volume. Roomy cabins, massive bench seats.
Plush suspensions for those long road trips.
Yeah, you wanted to comfortably cruise across Texas without feeling every single pothole. And the early muscle cars, the Mustangs, the Camaros, they were built to command presence.
To summarize that genetic baseline, Europe birthed machines requiring finesse and composed driving, while Detroit pursued quarter-mile glory, raw power, and really blue-collar affordability.
That mass production factor is huge. American muscle cars focused on interchangeable parts to lower costs. You didn't find hand-stitched leather in a '68 Chevelle, you found durable vinyl.
Right. So we have the European precision instrument and the American straight-line powerhouse. Because these vehicles hold such drastically different cultural weights, the way restorers approach them decades later is a massive philosophical divide.
It's the central tension of the classic vehicle world today.
Yeah.
It really boils down to two opposing schools of thought, the curatorial approach versus the creative approach.
Okay, break that down for me.
Well, in Europe, vehicles are viewed as historical artifacts. It's all about preservation. But in North America, vehicles are viewed as projects and personal statements. It's all about presentation.
Here's where it gets really interesting and where I have to push back a bit on this European mindset. Let's talk about patina.
Oh, the patina debate.
Yeah, because, to the uninitiated, patina is just a romantic word for rust, faded paint, and dry rot.
That's certainly how a lot of people see it.
Right. If I find a highly significant car sitting in a damp barn, the paint is chalky, the chrome is pitted, shouldn't a restorer's job be to fix it? Why on earth would faded paint be considered desirable?
Well, the European preservationist counters that there is a distinct line between active structural rot, which you have to fix, and stabilized patina.
So they just leave it looking old.
To them, patina equals authenticity plus a story. It is valuable historical evidence. The mantra over there is, it's only original once.
Really original once. Wow.
Yeah. Over-restoration can actually severely reduce a vehicle's value in Europe. Every rock chip from a 1960s rally is part of the car's provenance.
But if you strip the car to bare metal and repaint it, you're essentially destroying the historical record.
Exactly. You've wiped away the evidence. Organizations like FIFA have even drafted the Turin Charter, which sets strict protocols for preserving classic vehicles as rolling antiquities.
I understand the archival value of that, but man, that is definitely not how North America historically viewed a rusty quarter panel.
Not at all.
If a guy in California pulled a rusty coupe out of a field in 1955, he wasn't writing manifesto about primary source documentation.
No, he was grabbing an oxyacetylene torch and a grinder.
Exactly. The North American view was entirely pragmatic. Patina just meant the car needed to be restored. The goal was to make it look like it just left the factory, or usually much better.
And that stems from the cultural drivers. Europe has a dense history, centuries of architectural preservation deeply ingrained in the culture.
Plus all those deeply serious marquee clubs.
Right. Whereas North America's car culture was shaped by customization, dry lakes racing, hot rods, and personal expression. You bought a car, and you chopped the roof or swapped the engine to make it yours.
It's the difference between being a custodian of an artifact versus being the author of a project. So to really grasp this European curatorial mindset, we have to look at a restoration at the microscopic level, like down to the exact chemical makeup of a bolt.
It gets incredibly granular.
So is this essentially like restoring a Renaissance painting? You wouldn't use modern neon acrylics just because they're brighter. You'd use the exact crushed minerals from the 1500s, right?
That is a perfect analogy. In Europe, the goal is historic perfection, which completely supersedes cosmetic perfection.
Give me an example from the shop floor. What does prioritizing historic perfection actually look like?
Well, it manifests most clearly in what we call the imperfection rule.
The imperfection rule.
Yeah. When European vehicles were hand-assembled in the 50s and 60s, they weren't clinical. Workers left heavy file marks on lead body seams. They hastily brushed chassis black paint over frame rails.
Leaving visible brushstrokes.
Yes. And they applied seam sealer with absolute disregard for aesthetics. So in a high-end European restoration, a builder will spend hundreds of hours intentionally retaining or recreating those specific factory tool marks.
Wait, really? That requires a massive psychological shift. You're taking a master fabricator and forcing them to lay down a visually sloppy weld just because a guy in Maranello was rushing in 1963.
Yes, it takes agonizing discipline. Because to smooth out a chassis weld that the factory left rough is considered a historical falsification.
That is wild.
Yeah.
And does this exactitude extend to, like, the chemical finishes on the hardware?
Oh, absolutely. They agonize over the correct materials. They'll use proper dull finishes instead of modern gloss.
Like cadmium plating. Let's talk about cadmium plating, because I think that's the ultimate example of this obsession.
It really is. Historically, factories used cadmium plating on bolts because it offered great corrosion protection and had a natural lubricity. It has a very specific, slightly iridescent, dull, yellowish silver look.
Right. But cadmium is a highly toxic heavy metal. Most plating shops globally have banned it.
You usually have to go to specialized aerospace contractors to get it done today.
But a modern alternative, like yellow zinc chromate plating, is vastly cheaper, it's safer, and it protects the steel just as well. Why not just use zinc?
Because the yellow zinc looks slightly different. It's too bright. So the European restorer will go through immense logistical nightmares to source true cadmium plating, because modern zinc is historically dishonest.
Which leads right into their do no harm rule. Original components are repaired rather than replaced, right?
Exactly. Even if it takes 10 times the labor, you don't throw away a rusted floor pan. You meticulously cut out just the active rust and butt weld in a patch to preserve the original steel. Reproduction parts are used with extreme caution.
And major brands actually back this up now.
Oh yeah, Lamborghini's Polo Storco, Porsche Classic, they execute factory-certified bare metal restorations to ensure the car's true identity is preserved. Brands like Ducati, BMW, NSU, and CZ thrive on this exactitude.
Okay, so if Europe is carefully dusting off a museum artifact, North America is operating in a totally different paradigm. North America is basically building an idealized dream of what the past should have been.
This raises an important question, really. Should we be limited by the technological flaws or cost-cutting measures of the past?
And the North American philosophy largely says no. If the factory had access to modern TIG welders and catalyzed clear coats in 1969, they would have used them.
Exactly. So what does this all mean for the definition of restoration here?
I mean, I'll push you on that. Isn't it a bit contradictory to call it a restoration if you're upgrading everything?
It's the classic ship of Theseus paradox. But in North America, restoration really means restoring a vehicle to its maximum theoretical potential, which leads us to the frame-off phenomenon.
Yeah, the frame-off rotisserie restoration, you hear that at every local cruise night. It's a full frame-off.
It's the pursuit of absolute flawlessness, full disassembly is standard, the body is unbolted from the chassis, clean, flawless finishes are prioritized over factory accuracy.
Let's talk about bodywork, because this is where the American shops fix those factory mistakes the Europeans are trying to preserve.
Right. Think about panel gaps. On a mass-produced muscle car in 1969, the factory panel gaps were often terrible, asymmetrical, and wide. A top-tier North American restorer will add welding rod to the edges of the doors and fenders, meticulously grinding them down so the gap is a perfectly uniform, laser-straight 3 millimeters across the entire car. Perfect symmetry is expected.
Even if the factory originally produced sloppy gaps. And this modernization extends to materials, too. North American builders embrace modern tech.
Oh, completely. They swap factory paint on the chassis for incredibly durable, modern powder coat. They use polished stainless steel hardware instead of original low-grade bolts.
And mechanically, the upgrade path is aggressive. They proactively replace components for what they call driver quality reliability.
Yeah, you rip out the old brittle wiring harness and install a brand new mil-spec electrical system, upgraded seals, synthetic gaskets.
Because you want to merge onto an interstate at 75 miles per hour without worrying that a historically accurate points ignition system is going to fail on you.
Exactly. And because American muscle was historically affordable and meant to be customized, the culture is very accepting of this evolution.
Which is why Restomide culture is so massive here.
Right. Taking a 1969 Camaro shell, but grafting a modern fuel-injected V8, big disc brakes, and custom suspension underneath it. It's celebrated.
Okay, so we have these two philosophies, curatorial versus creative. But the reality is the modern global market is forcing them to interact, clash, and sometimes blend.
The international auction market is really where this gets put to the test.
Let's follow the money. What's the value discrepancy look like?
In Europe, an unrestored but original car can be vastly more valuable than a restored one. Matching numbers and original finishes are critical. Those European exotics with patina fetch massive premiums.
But in North America, high-quality, visually stunning aesthetic restorations and restomods often fetch the highest auction prices. Top dollar goes to the flawless finish.
Yes, though we are seeing global online auctions start to blend these standards.
Well, let's apply this directly to a listener for a second. If you are working on a project in your garage in North America, say, focusing on period-correct hardware, authentic finishes, and historical accuracy for a vintage CZ or NSU, you're actually operating under the European philosophy.
Yes, exactly, even if you're geographically in the US or Canada. And honestly, bringing European exactitude to a North American build is currently a massive competitive advantage.
Really? How so?
Especially in higher-end or historically significant restorations. Because the default instinct here is to over-restore. When you present a masterfully preserved, historically accurate vehicle, it commands incredible respect from high-end collectors.
Because it takes immense discipline to look at a slightly pitted part and say, I have the ability to polish this, but I'm going to leave it exactly as it is.
Exactly. But, the sands are shifting. The gap between the two continents is narrowing.
Yeah. North America is starting to value patina builds and originality a lot more now.
And conversely, Europe is becoming slightly more accepting of what they call sympathetic restorations, where you fix functionality without erasing character.
Which makes sense with the rise of global auction platforms.
Platforms like Bring a Trailer have entirely blurred the geographic lines. Everyone is seeing what everyone else is doing.
Which leads me to a final provocative thought. Something for you to mull over after this deep dive. As global online auctions blur the lines between continents and 25-year import rules allow for easy transatlantic shipping of these classics, are we heading toward a homogenized global standard of restoration?
That's a great question.
And if so, do we risk losing the beautiful, stubborn regional quirks that made these cars and their respective cultures so special in the first place?
It's a profound thought. The tension between preserving history and perfecting it is what makes all of this so captivating.
It really is. We want to remind you to visit the BluewaterAutoRestoration.com website. And as a quick reminder, our podcasts are available on Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, or SoundCloud.